In 2009, Hollywood megastar Nicolas found himself facing financial ruin, ultimately owing the IRS over $6 million, despite having raked in an estimated $150 million throughout his acting career. This immediately brings up a fascinating dilemma regarding wealth itself. A massive chunk of our daily drive and lifelong ambitions is fueled by the urge to gather cash. Yet what is the actual purpose of hoarding it if our biggest blind spot is our sheer inability to keep it from slipping through our fingers? American households are carrying over $1 trillion in credit card balances. What this translates to is simple. We missed the lesson. Borrowed money is a silent weight, crushing the most financially fragile among us. And while these numbers reflect a specific Western demographic, take a second to evaluate your personal dynamic with your finances. What exactly does cash mean to you? Does it feel like a brief visitor that exits your bank account the second it arrives? Has a lack of it ever left you so desperate that you almost bought into a shady crypto scam or paid a self-proclaimed genius for a guaranteed wealth-building masterclass? While the overarching goal of my content is to untangle these exact webs, I've come to understand that our psychological framing of wealth is infinitely more critical than our capacity to earn it, especially considering our brains are biologically rigged to be terrible at long-term financial planning. What difference does a high salary bracket make if, when December rolls around, your net worth is exactly zero? Where are the wires getting crossed? We need to crack this code and, more importantly, construct a healthier paradigm for viewing our finances. A paradigm that is a staple in financial literacy circles, but practically invisible in our standard school systems. What is money? Let me ask you, what is cash fundamentally? When you swipe your card for a coffee, or when your employer deposits your biweekly paycheck, what is the actual meaning behind those digits? Economists will quickly define it as a medium of exchange, a standardized tool that greases the wheels of commerce so people can trade goods. But I argue that this barely scratches the surface of its true nature. A far more accurate lens is to view cash as a physical manifestation of value. You surrender a specific portion of your funds for a product because you believe the utility of that product matches the digits you just gave up. Naturally, the overarching market dictates the exact price tag, not you alone. But zoom in on this fundamental truth. Currency equals value. Why does this perspective shift matter so much? Because we have a nasty habit of attaching moral weight to paper and coins. We've all heard the old proverb, money is the root of all evil. We spot a billionaire, and our immediate reflex is, they got a lucky break. Who did they have to crush to climb that high? Whose pocket did they pick to fill their own? Almost no one pauses to ask, what massive problem did they solve to accumulate that level of compensation? Grasping the concept that cash is merely a byproduct of provided value is the quickest way to realize that wealth isn't inherently sinister, and holding it doesn't make someone a villain. Absolutely, con artists exist who will manipulate you into buying worthless garbage, but that is a reflection of their rotten ethics, not the currency itself. Wealth simply amplifies your freedom and removes barriers. The exact path you walk with that newfound freedom is entirely dictated by your own internal compass. Production versus consumption. All right, so currency is just a mirror of value. What next? How does this philosophical shift help the single parent drowning in overdraft fees or the young professional suffocating under auto loans? Merely whispering value equals wealth pays exactly zero bills. It might reframe your mindset, but where is the practical application? To get there, I have another prompt for you. How would you define your financial metabolism? Capital will flow toward you, and it will flow away from you. We typically label this dynamic as income and expenditures, but a much more functional framework, and one I heavily prefer, is viewing it as your production versus your consumption. Generally speaking, funds enter your orbit because you generated some measurable value, which, for the vast majority of society, translates to clocking in at a job. Conversely, funds evaporate when you absorb something: a streaming subscription, a lease on a sedan, a mortgage. In a very real sense, a person's net worth is simply the ultimate scoreboard of how their production stacks up against their consumption over time. Now, Rewind to the debt statistics from the beginning of this essay. Which side of that equation is causing the modern crisis? Turn the spotlight on yourself for a minute. Visualize all the wages you've ever earned. What percentage of that historical total is currently sitting in your checking account or growing in an index fund? And which half of your personal equation is bleeding out? The reality is probably both. But for 99% of people, the catastrophic failure is happening on the consumption end. Consider the recent Lending Club data revealing that over 60% of U.S. consumers currently live from one paycheck to the next. Even more staggering, of those pulling in over $100,000 annually, roughly half of them are stuck in the exact same paycheck-to-paycheck cycle. You could easily make the case that high earners simply want to earn more. But when your take-home pay completely eclipses a national average and covers baseline survival with ease, yet you still manage to drain your accounts to zero every 30 days, the diagnosis is clear. Your consumption habits are fatally flawed, and fixing your income won't cure the disease. As every bankrupt A-list actor proves, a massive production engine is utterly useless if your consumption engine is running out of control. The real rat race, a grueling, inescapable loop of futile effort. Gurus love to weaponize this term, pointing directly at your standard 9-to-5 corporate gig. It's a manipulative marketing tactic designed to make you feel pathetic so you'll instantly buy their secret escape blueprint. But this is wildly deceptive. It unfairly demonizes honest labor and completely ignores the massive demographic of people who genuinely enjoy their careers or who view their day job as a perfectly fine foundation for outside hobbies. The actual rat race is a terrifying reality of balancing on a financial tightrope, the perpetual panic of being a single missed shift away from total ruin. It's the suffocating sensation that your paycheck is spoken for before it even clears. And the older you get and the more liabilities you sign for, the deadlier this tightrope becomes. A sudden corporate layoff, a random medical emergency, or a broken transmission can immediately trigger a catastrophic financial collapse. Think about the psychological toll of existing in that state of fragility. Your employment is no longer a choice you make, but a mandatory prison sentence required just to keep the lights on and the creditors at bay. To borrow a brilliant line from Will Rogers, too many people spend money they haven't earned, to buy things they don't want, to impress people that they don't like. Taking control of consumption. So what's the escape route? You don't have to stay on the tightrope. The foundational leap in wealth management requires forcing yourself to look at the ugly truth of your spending. This means tracking every single outflow for a month and tossing them into buckets. Rent, gas, groceries, Wi-Fi, nights out. It's about auditing your own consumer psychology, but it's excruciatingly uncomfortable. In the realm of behavioral economics, this avoidance is dubbed the ostrich effect, the hardwired human reflex to bury our heads in the sand when faced with grim financial data. It's that pit in your stomach that stops you from logging into your banking app after an expensive weekend trip. But once you push through that initial friction, you unlock the ability to dictate your consumer behavior. This is where a budget comes into play, pre-assigning a rigid dollar amount to your spending buckets before the month even begins, and actually honoring those limits. It's the systematic execution of trimming the fat, allowing you to finally live beneath your income level. Simply put, it's designing a daily existence that organically leaves surplus cash to stockpile and invest. And critically, before you throw a single dime into the stock market, the golden rule of basic finance dictates building a cash buffer, an emergency reserve designed to cover 3 to 6 months of vital expenses if the sky falls. But why is intentionally living below our means so vital? Why on earth do we gravitate toward lifestyles we objectively cannot finance, dragging ourselves onto that stressful tightrope? I could easily dedicate a 2-hour documentary to our mental blind spots. The ostrich effect is just one roadblock. There's also hyperbolic discounting. Our brains glitch that prioritizes a tiny hit of dopamine right now over a massive payoff a decade down the line. That's the voice in your head rationalizing a luxury watch purchase instead of funneling that cash into a Roth IRA. Then there is social proof, our evolutionary desperation to mirror the tribe. If your friend group is financing designer clothes, you feel compelled to do the same. If your family insists wealth is inherently dirty, you subconsciously adopt that exact prejudice. The age-old idiom, keeping up with the Joneses, perfectly encapsulates this consumption cancer. It's the exhausting treadmill of matching your neighbor's extravagant purchases to avoid feeling inferior. They upgrade their kitchen, you remodel your bathroom. They lease a Tesla, you go sign for an Audi. All of it is a theatrical performance driven by peer pressure. Except today, the Joneses aren't just the family next door. They are thousands of perfectly curated influencers on your screen. We are intensely vulnerable to external validation. We are terrified of social judgment. And tragically, we've started calculating our human value based on the engagement metrics of our latest vacation photos. As the Federal Reserve's data often implies, carrying consumer debt has just become the normalized American baseline. Let me be entirely clear. I am not claiming that buying a tailored suit, a diamond ring, or a fast car is morally corrupt, nor is the act of buying things evil. The goal of this breakdown is not to give a philosophical lecture on the modern tragedy of materialism. The goal is to force you to look in the mirror as a consumer. Do you prioritize the illusion of wealth over the reality of financial security? The real rat race isn't a cubicle. It's sprinting so fast to acquire the next shiny distraction that your actual, meaningful life ambitions get suffocated under a pile of monthly payments. Tracking your outflow and enforcing a budget are the undeniable, battle-tested antidotes to this poison. Fantasizing about millions is entertaining, but what is the utility of a massive income if your lack of discipline guarantees you'll bleed it all dry and be forced to grind until you die just to maintain the facade? That is the real rat race. Producing at scale. With the defensive strategy covered, let's pivot to the offense. Generating capital. Mainstream financial educators like Suze Orman or Mr. Money Mustache are phenomenal resources for locking down the consumption half of the formula. However, the glaring gap in their core messaging is often their ability to teach you how to make more money. And their reasoning makes logical sense. Coaching a mass audience to stop buying lattes is far easier to implement than coaching a mass audience to double their salaries. Broad defensive advice is the safest bet for a general demographic. We see entire subcultures dedicated entirely to extreme frugality. Take the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. Their entire playbook revolves around slashing expenses to the bone, hoarding every penny, and dumping it into index funds to escape the workforce decades early. Minimalists echo this vibe, though their stance is usually anchored in a rejection of consumer culture rather than just math. Figures like Orman champion these highly accessible, slow and steady, penny-pinching blueprints. And there's absolutely nothing flawed with that path. It is highly effective for a wide range of people with varying baseline incomes. But let's look at the reality behind the curtain. Top-tier finance creators aren't making millions in ad revenue because they skip the Starbucks drive-thru. Elite financial personalities don't build nine-figure empires strictly through clipping coupons. They achieve those numbers by leveraging production on a massive scale. As I've explored previously, your income is directly tied to the value the market assigns to you, and the ultimate cheat code for skyrocketing that value is identifying a widespread pain point, engineering a cure, and distributing that cure to the masses. That is the essence of entrepreneurship. A properly scaled enterprise generates such an overwhelming wave of societal value that your personal production metrics dwarf the output of a standard hourly wage. Now, is the startup founder life meant for everyone? Absolutely not. And forcing it is a recipe for burnout. You have to audit your own capabilities, but expanding your production doesn't exclusively mean incorporating a massive tech company. Content creators use the internet as a vehicle to distribute education or entertainment to millions of screens simultaneously. That exact leverage is why I pivoted to YouTube. It serves as a hyper-efficient distribution engine for these video essays, allowing me to scale my output to a level where I can build a legitimate media business around it. Production boils down to injecting tangible utility into the marketplace. I leaned into my background in research, storytelling, and digital editing to craft visual essays that hopefully provide a mix of insight and engagement. And thankfully, the audience rewarded that effort. Your unique vehicle for production might be coding a piece of software that automates a frustrating administrative task. Or maybe it's launching an apparel brand that perfectly taps into a passionate niche, much like Sarah Blakely did when she revolutionized the undergarment industry with Spanx. For the vast majority, a standard employment contract will remain their primary engine of production. But that doesn't mean your capacity to create value hits a brick wall at 5 p.m. Recognizing your identity as a producer means constantly hunting for avenues to deliver more utility to the world. High-volume value creation translates to high-volume compensation. The digital age has thankfully democratized the ability to build something and test it in the wild. But the only way to find out if the market actually values your creation is to hit publish and find out. Conclusion. Let's bring it all together. Your first mission is to analyze your habits as a consumer. Map out exactly where your cash is bleeding by auditing your history, and then deploy a strict budget to stop the hemorrhage. Once the defense is set, your production becomes a game of optimizing the scale of value you can deliver to the world. Whether that's climbing the ranks in your career, launching a side hustle, or building an enterprise. This mental shift completely rewired my own trajectory, just as it has for countless individuals serious about building lasting wealth.